Okay, it is the boxing show. I'm here with my good friend Dakota, but don't worry about Dakota. Let's go to Larry, big time boxing promoter who has really been getting some traction with these great articles. Larry, why don't you tell people about yourself and kind of these articles you've been writing?
Um, I'm, I don't even know where to begin. I've had the Boxing Insider site since 1998, and around 2022, I did some club fights, and I've just done 20 of them back to back in New York and New Jersey. And sort of always my dream going to these fights. So then when you had the Boxing Insider website, I'm gonna tell you guys, we go to the big fights, we go to the little fights. You daydream, you go to enough of them, especially the little ones, and it was kind of like, well, I could do this. I want to do this. Maybe I should do this. And I got it, and I kind of got the bug, and we started doing it. And I was a little different than the other promoters because, I was a gym guy. I knew a lot of the fighters. I was from the media, so I had different ideas of doing this. And, we started doing them, and it's been a lot of fun. About, I don't know, a few months ago, I relaunched Boxing Insider website, and with all the changes that are going on in the boxing industry, nobody was really writing or conveying what was going on. It's very easy to say, this guy sucks, this one's great, this is good, this is bad, but there's a lot of nuances to what's going on. And if you would have asked me about this stuff 5 years ago, I wouldn't have known. But you do a show with New Jersey or New York, and you go through the regulatory process, you see fighters come and you see them go, you see the struggles, the trials and tribulations. It changes you. And I think this is a time where I think that people have to speak up and, affect change if possible.
Okay, so that leads into my first kind of question is the difference between promoting when you were like an outside promoter, a fan, a media guy, to actually becoming a promoter. What was the big differences you noticed right away in that first year and two?
What I noticed was boxing isn't what we think it is. How many times have we gone to the Barclays Center or MSG? We sit in our media section. We're close. We see what's going on. We think we know what's going on. And then I learned the hard way. We had no freaking idea what was going on. I liken it to us going to the bar down the street. Ooh, the drinks are a little warm today. Oh, the bartender's an idiot. Oh, this. But you have no idea what's going on behind in the kitchen. You have no idea what's really going on, with the owner. Is he behind on the rent? You don't know what's going on. So I learned the hard way that boxing on the promotional level was not how you think it would be. So those first early fights, there was a learning curve, and I made mistakes, things that I, would not do today. And it's been a learning experience, and it's been a fun learning experience, but it's been a stressful learning experience as well.
Sometimes as a podcast, the best stuff is the learning experience. Do you have any funny stories about failure when you started out?
Oh, they're all failures. I mean, I have nothing but failure stories. Our first fight. So I didn't really. I'm like the accidental boxing promoter. Like, I won an award for Promoter of the Year. We're the ones who brought boxing back after the pandemic on the grassroots level in New York. I was not supposed to be a pro boxing promoter. I can't begin to tell you how hard it is to get licensed in New York. I was an amateur boxing promoter. I went to Sonia Lamonicus. She runs amateur boxing in New York at a Gleason's gym. I've been sponsoring the Golden Gloves, Ringmasters, for many years. And by sponsoring, it was I give them T-shirts and hats and, give them some money. We were on those tank tops, that kind of stuff. So my friend did a pro wrestling company, and he drags me out to his show, and I was bored, and he disappears. And all of a sudden, the ring guy walks up to me, and he goes, "Hey, where'd Rob go? He owes me $400. I go in his bag. Here's the money. Write it down." The other guy comes. Next thing you know, I'm basically like running the show, kind of. Not really running the show, but enough where I'm just sitting there like, if I do this like this and this like this, I could do boxing like this. So I come back and I tell her I want to do a show. So she comes to me. She says, "All right, I want you to find a venue that holds at least 500 people in New York City. It doesn't cost over $10,000. It doesn't blah, 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 blah. Good luck. never expected to see me again, because 100 people have walked into our office saying that they want to go do a boxing show. And again, there are no venues in New York City for this. So I found a venue. It's called Sony Hall. And, we knew somebody who knew someone, and we did a boxing show there. So I don't know, maybe, and I had a very good relationship with them until we showed up at the event. And this didn't get done right, and this didn't get done right. And the reason that I was able to get Sony Hall for so cheap was, the old expression, you get what you pay for. Well, I had no support staff. We basically got an empty venue. Well, amateur boxing needs this setup this way, this. People are coming in buying tickets. The ticket lady didn't care. And about an hour into the show, I thought I was going to get murdered by Sonia, who was the former IBO heavyweight champion of the world. Like, she was literally like, I had to stay on the other side of the venue for the remainder of the show. And it was a tremendous learning experience of what we did wrong on this show. But, that was our first show. And it was like, and it was like I failed at the amateur show, but Sony Hall liked our show and they wanted me to come back, but I couldn't come back with an amateur show. So next thing you know, I get linked up with Lou DiBella, and I get my promoter's license, and I promote the shows at Sony Hall, and we've done since October 2022. I've been the promoter of 12 shows at Sony Hall. Yeah, 12 shows at Sony Hall, 7 at Tropicana, and 1 in Riverhead, New York.
Dakota, why don't you ask a question so I don't just dominate?
Well, and I've had the pleasure of covering some of your fights at Sony Hall. Those have been some great shows. But I guess one question that I would have to start off is, you say it's like when you're on the outside looking in, it's like you don't know what's going on in the back of the restaurant. What was going on? What were some of the things that you could talk about that were going on in the back of the restaurant that caught you off guard or that were surprising for you?
I'll talk about anything because I come from the media. I'm surprising that I've gotten this far with it. So it's, you know what I mean? Like there's no nuclear secrets. We all know this is a shady business. We all know it's a shady business. It's not surprising that it's a shady business. But when you walk in there saying, look, I wasn't a shady person. Like, I had Boxing Insider, I dealt with certain assholes in the media, there were times where there were stories on my website that were written by people that in hindsight, I wish I didn't allow, in the old days, of course. But you don't really understand how the sausage gets made. And as the lead promoter, they can't hide things from me. So when, and this doesn't happen on my shows per se, but if a third party is putting on a fight, right, and they say, all right, I've got an opponent, here's $10,000, find us a B-side. Okay, so now the call goes out. We're looking for a guy at 125 pounds to fight 8 rounds. There's 10 grand. Okay, and then you get the call. Hey man, I got a great opportunity for you. 6 grand, you fight at Sony Hall. Yeah, it's gonna be great. Your last fight, you only got 3. This is beautiful. You're gonna make 6 grand. Calls me up. All right, you need to write 2 checks. I get 6. He gets 6 and I get 4. The other fighter doesn't even know about the 4. That's not a licensed promoter. Now that's an exaggeration of how it goes, but that goes. I mean, there is a lot of underhandedness. There's a lot of fighters not knowing what goes on in their career. Fighters not understanding why they lost an opportunity for somebody else. Why I want to use him over him. And what I had learned, what I had done at the very beginning was, I was, from New York. So I was basically trying to do the Gleason's Jim Mendez boxing show with all the local fighters. It was impossible to do. And when you understand how to put these things together, you kind of understand why it's so impossible to do, because nobody wants to fight anybody. Nobody wants to take the risk unless they get a lot of money, money that you can't do in the club circuit. And it's very difficult. There's a lot of things that go on into it, especially from the medical testing, from, I had a handshake agreement with them. Do I have to honor it? Does this other promoter have to honor my handshake agreement? No, but we operate in the same ecosystem. Certain promoters will honor it. Certain promoters I've dealt with in boxing are very, very honorable people. Their handshake, they've been great to deal with. Other people that I've dealt with in boxing are the biggest, slimiest pieces of shit, two-faced piece garbage that you've ever met in your entire life. And it's just, and there are some of the ones that come with smiles. And, sometimes it's just infuriating when you're like, I have done everything above board and I'm sitting here and you're playing me against this other guy, over a ham sandwich who isn't. And so, those kind of things, and you get kind of emotionally attached, and in boxing, people think they have the permission to be a scumbag, and they'll just be like, oh, well, it's just boxing. Oh, it's boxing. I'm just going to go across the street and forget all the work you put into me. And then a week later, hey, I'm back. Remember this? It's like, yeah, but I also remember this. Oh, no. It's boxing. Now, look, if you're Conor Benn, you're getting $15 million. Yeah, it's boxing. But, on the indie local circuit, when you're putting guys over that, I mean, let's be honest, they wouldn't be fighting on club boxing shows if they were signed to Top Rank. I mean, I shouldn't say that because obviously these other promoters put fights on cards like ours, but what what I'm trying to say. And so it's been a lot because the fighters usually don't know what's going on in their careers, and there's very little that you can do. I'm at the point now where I've pretty much been instructed that, I can't talk. I can't talk to these fighters, a lot of the fighters anymore. It's very much like, oh, I'm only allowed to talk to their managers, because when you talk to the fighters, they keep things for the managers. Things just don't, connect. And it's a very, very difficult business, especially with the contracts and the cutthroat nature of the business.
So let's get into the lead. Let's not bury the lead. Where does the little guy go in the modern boxing? You've written a bunch of articles. We linked it in this stream. You've done a wonderful job at outlining things, but I wanted to get some in-depth. You wrote this story where you go, is it over for the little guy? I'm paraphrasing, but talk to us about the Muhammad Ali Revival Act, what it does for club promoters, and your perception of what is happening for regional level boxing right now.
So this has been a learning experience. At first, it was very easy to kind of point, fingers. Zuf is the bad guy. They're not the bad guy. They really aren't. But what happened was they submitted a bill. And when they say, nothing is going to change, they weren't lying. Again, we can argue, can they do a UFC model for boxing? I personally don't have a problem with that. In the article that we posted today, what happened was in January, they had a markup meeting. And in the markup meeting, a bunch of senators changed Zuf's bill, and they added this language for drug testing, which is Olympic-style drug testing. Whether it's what will end up happening or not at the final product, it's what's actually in the physical bill right now, which by itself would crush a club promoter. I learned boxing from Lou DiBella, and Lou used to rant and rave to anyone that would listen that New York has $1 million brain policy, and we have the most expensive insurance in the country. So that comes out to, with the premiums, about $1,800 a match. That right there, on top of the slim margins on a club promotion, that extra $8,000 to $12,000 is really the profit margin if you have a chance of making any money on these shows. So that immediately killed club boxing in New York. Of course, the other argument is, if these guys get hurt, you kind of want them to be insured. So, you're looking for that right model. The Muhammad Ali Boxing Act, again, I don't have a problem with Zuffa or TKO or any of them. I really think they're going to be extremely good for the sport. I have a problem that a bunch of congressmen have changed what they did, and again, if they want to get a pass, they're going to have to get a pass like this right now. And I'm hoping that they change it. But look, I've had Boxing Insider since 1998. I never wrote anything. I mean, I was behind the scenes doing a lot of the stuff, but I never put myself out there. But now that I'm doing this and I'm looking around, there is nobody in the boxing media covering what this is, or if they're covering it, it's under the it's under the it's under the context of, ooh, Zuffa's bad, they're bad for boxing, we don't want them, or Eddie Hearn's great, we love them, and it's not black and white. Both groups can coexist. I don't have a problem with that. I love what these guys have done, and I know what Zuffa boxing is going to do. I mean, there are things in the Muhammad Ali Boxing Act that are beautiful. They're going to finally end what the WBA has been doing with all those fake championship belts. That's in there. That's gone. I mean, who doesn't want to see that happen? So where it goes for club promoters, I don't know, because I can tell you over the last, when we started in 2022, if I had a call for a local kid from Gleason's gym and we got a 6-round fight and we were offering, the standard fee, what a 6-round fight would go for around, you would have 20 fighters be reaching out to us. Now in today's day and age, the price is doubled, and you get an 11-5 guy who would normally jump on a $6,000, $8,000 purse on short notice, take the money, have a good fight. Maybe he wins, maybe he loses. They're all saying, "Hey, I'm waiting to see if Turkey or Zuffa calls me." Or I'm going to go do MMA, or I'll hold off until there's a very, very easy fight. And it's becoming more and more difficult to make fights. And that's just the truth. And then at the same time, the commissions, we know more about injuries today than we knew 5 years ago or 15 years ago. So of course the commissions are going to ask for more medical testing and more, but that costs money. So it becomes more expensive, and the fighters don't want to fight anybody. And yes, the answer is it over for the little guy? I'm very, very curious to ask Russell Peltz next time I speak to him, if I gave him $1 million today and the 2300 arena or his favorite casino ballroom, could he do today what he did 30 years ago? I don't think he can.
Dakota, what are your thoughts?
Well, I guess one thing I would love for you to describe, if somebody hasn't read the piece, it was a great piece, by the way, at least the first one that Lukey was referring to. What is kind of your thesis, or how would you describe that larger change in boxing that you're describing, outside of just sort of like the fighter's reaction to offers or to purses?
Can you direct me a little bit more on that?
Well, I think the statement of, is it over for the little guy? What is it that has changed in the last couple of years that you view as a threat to that?
I think this is more of a societal problem. I'm going to use the example. What if the three of us owned a donut shop? Dakota, you and I own the donut shop. Lukey, you sold me the dough. 3 of us, we were in business. You make the best dough. We have a shop. We're selling donuts for $2 a donut. You go and you can sell your dough to the donut shop down the street. And we're small business America. We've got our local clients. We can do whatever we want. We're doing great. Krispy Kreme comes on, opens a super shop across the street. They're not buying their dough from you, no matter how good your dough is. And they can now undercut us. We can't compete. We're out of business. So when I was saying, was it over for the little guy? I was talking about the little promoter, but I think just in general can you just be an entrepreneur in today's day and age, or is everything going to be, a giant company? When Don King and Bob Arum and these guys were running boxing, these were companies that was them. It was them. We're not dealing, and this is kind of where the thesis of a lot of the boxing people get it wrong. Dana White's not the boogeyman, but understand this. If Dana White quit the UFC tomorrow and hired the 3 of us to run a brand new company, Dana White Promotions could stand up and eat the lunch of pretty much every other boxing promoter in boxing with his war chest and his skills. Okay, he 100% can, and that's just literally Dana White being backed by us 3 idiots. Okay, that's not what's going on right now. He's backed by the company that owns the UFC, the freaking WWE. They have bull riding. They have a market cap of $49 billion with a B dollars. Everyone made Al Heyman the boogeyman when he had $350-400 million from Waddell Reed. They're worth $49 billion, and Zuffa is being funded by Sella, so it's not even risking them. And you have some of the greatest minds in the history of this game, like Nick Khan and some of these other guys that are behind it, like, Ari Emanuel, Mark Shapiro. Like this is a well-oiled machine. This isn't Don King getting up on the microphone and being able to out-talk, Loathsome Bob or whatever was going on. So it's sort of funny when the media and Eddie, they're trying try to make it like Eddie and Dana. Like, this isn't Eddie and Dana. This is the company that Vince McMahon built, plus the company that the Lorenzo Fertitta and Dana White built, plus the Ari Emanuel, the largest agent in Hollywood, plus I mean, there's so many layers to this where, what I'm not even like, my budget for the show is not even what some like part-time temp makes. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's a completely different world than what we were used to.
What do you think then of their sort of like open desire to, I guess, facilitate like a monopoly of sorts? And
will not use the word. I will say that, look, let's take the point of view that they're the worst people to ever walk the face of the earth. I don't believe that, but for the record, all they're going to do is what they're going to basically do is they're going to basically beat other people who are the worst people in the face of the earth. Boxing is in a really bad state of mind because of a lot of dysfunction. They allowed this to happen. So just because one set of gatekeepers who are not perfect by any stretch of the imagination are being replaced by another set of gatekeepers, it's not necessarily a good thing or a bad thing. It's a change thing. But when I say, is it over for the little guy? The dream always was, you could walk into the gym and, oh my God, there's young Floyd Mayweather and I'm going to sign him and we're going to go all the way to the top. He's going to make $100 million. I'm going to make $10 million. Or, everyone around us is going to get rich. That was always the dream. If the dream is to go to the UFC, you don't hear about that. That's not how it works. You're not, so therefore it crushes the club scene because all of a sudden the outside investors who fund these fighters aren't going to be around because there's not going to be the payoff. But again, the other side of the argument is the middle class fighters who can get into the system are going to do better. Like, if this is not a all good or all bad, but the paradigm that we grew up with is going to change drastically. And like I said, I don't think these are, like I said, I like what Nick Khan did for WWE. I like what Dana White did with UFC. I know for a fact, because I was media in those old days, his whole play was, he used to tell us, he was a boxing fan. He saw everything that boxing did wrong, and that was how they built the UFC. But if you remember, the UFC that we all grew up and loved was owned by the Fertitta brothers. Now it is owned by a TKO holding group, which is part of these big conglomerates, and it's kind of hard to connect all the dots. And so it's a little bit different because, like I said, we all see what's going on in WWE. We all see what's going on in UFC world. The ticket prices are going up. Ronda Rousey speaking, of all people, Ronda Rousey speaking up. I mean, that to me was shocking. So, I think that in the next 6 months to a year, there's going to be a big, big change. And the answer is it over for the little guy? I think it's over unless, we connect to one of the big guys. But I don't think that, the way that I could have run club boxing 5 years ago, or the way I was running club boxing in 2023, I'll be able to do in 27.
What is a UBO by your definition, and how does a UBO affect what you do?
A UBO is a United Boxing Organization. I did this AI thing, which sort of kind of drew it. It basically it's basically a bubble. It's the same way, like, if you're in the MMA world, you're in the UFC, you're in that bubble. But it doesn't matter if you're the best 155-pound guy in the IFL or one of the indie promotions. You're not in the UFC bubble. You don't count. And so the UBO will allow them to, again, have their own belt like the UFC. It creates a regulatory framework for them to do that, which doesn't currently exist under the current Muhammad Ali Boxing Act. The current Muhammad Ali Boxing Act allows for strong managers. It allows for Keith Connolly to take Eddie Hearn's fighter and go right across the street with him, because there's a separation of church and state, and it's good for the fighters. The people who put together the original Muhammad Ali Boxing Act loved the boxing, and they understood how it could be corrupted. But I wish this was on tape somewhere. I was in my early 20s, maybe even a little bit younger. It's one of the first boxing press conferences I ever went to. And it was when the Muhammad Ali Boxing Act got passed. And it was a Don King press conference. And he's up on stage and, he's ranting and raving. This isn't the Muhammad Ali Boxing Act. This is the Don King Boxing Act. They're attacking me, but I will think this was all put together because of stuff that he was doing 30 years ago with Carl King, and he was acting in everybody's interest and blah, blah, blah. So those problems don't exist today. Unfortunately, there's new problems. I don't think the current act addresses those problems, but the current act does allow for the regulatory structure for a UFC type model to exist in boxing, which again, this is America, freedom of choice. I'm saying that the way that they're setting it up will potentially choke off the other side of it.
Let's get into something that really was interesting to me is the drug testing component. Drug testing, I think, is something we're all in favor of. And I think we want fighters to be tested. But at the same point, that does cost money. So I'm wondering about the financial strain that comes with drug testing and what type of drug testing would be enacted for the club promoters.
Drug testing it's almost like a boogeyman thing. The minute you come out against it, you're an awful human being. And it's the same thing as the insurance, $1 million policy, $500,000 policy. You go to other states, it's $10,000 policy. What's the number? Is it moral to have $1 million but not 10? What's the number? I don't know. It really just comes down to the economics of scale. There are levels to this. There are tons of supplements. People have brains. You can see one guy who looks like a monster. You might want to test him. You can see another guy. You might want to test him for ham sandwiches. Again, it's every state does it a little bit different. There should absolutely be a baseline of drug testing. A lot of states in this country, a lot of the commissions in this country are absolute dog shit. I don't mind saying that because the truth is, I'm a club promoter. I'm never leaving New York or New Jersey. Now, of course, I'm saying that, and next thing tomorrow, I'm gonna get a phone call. Hey, you want to come to this state? I'll be like, yeah, no, I was trashing the commissioner on the radio yesterday. No, I don't want to go there. But I know how it's run in New York and New Jersey. Which again, if you go to these states for any business whatsoever, they are considered two of the most regulated states. And it's always popular. It's always been the political talking point. We want less regulations. I'm telling you, as a club promoter, and I deal with some of the other people in this business, you want more regulations. But you want the right regulations done by the right regulators, looking for the right things, because, again, you can't allow any of us to run roughshod because it's so easy to cut corners. It's so easy. It's so tempting. And people get hurt. And what I like about the regulators that we've dealt with, it's been very cut and dry. It's like people have gotten hurt. Therefore, you know what? The paperwork has to be precise. The medical clearances have to be precise. And in every case, could you make the argument, could it be better? Of course it could be better. I could have started this podcast knowing how to work my speakers. Everything could be better, but we have to come to a level that we can accept. And it can't be, me doing a show in Sony Hall with 450 people can't be held to the same standard of a show at MSG in front of 20,000 people. But I can tell you right now on the insurance, I'm paying the same for that insurance policy for a 4-round fight at Sony Hall as they're paying for a 12-round championship bout at MSG. It's the same exact insurance policy. And again, it makes it harder and harder. Now you add another layer of cost and another layer of cost. And it's not like that one cost is what's going to put you there, but at some point it's going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back. But we need steroid testing in boxing. We need drug testing in boxing. And there's almost nothing that will be, good. But I just want to leave the other point out. Pat English raised this when he wrote a letter about the bill originally. Why are we being singled out? Whatever rules that they want to throw in our face as boxing, and I say this as a boxing fan because, look, I might just go back to the media tomorrow. I don't know. But as a boxing fan, doesn't it seem right that if you're going to require X, Y, and Z for boxing, in regards to regulations. That same exact regulation should be, for mixed martial arts. That same exact regulation should be for full contact karate or any other combat sports. I'm not trying to say, but come on, you can't tell us that we have to do this and that the other guy doesn't have to do that, because I'm telling you, the same commissions regulate MMA and boxing in these states, and the only thing different are the rules of engagement once you get in the ring or octagon.
I think one thing that I once heard from a wise cut man, Mike Rodriguez, who's now doing broadcasting, is commissions are like TSAs. Like TSA, when you go through security, they're all different, yet they're all the same. It's like some are finicky about your toothpaste and stuff. Really, really solid points there. I guess I know you're into pro wrestling a little bit. I don't know if Dakota wanted to ask a question, but the thing I wanted to ask you is, I think a lot of people are looking at what Zoof is doing and saying that's the UFC model. To me, it's more of the WWF, WWE model of let's get all the exciting talent over a period of 20 years and build a product that people want to see. From a promoter standpoint, how would you contextualize what is happening from that standpoint?
Well, I'm toying with a column right now today when I saw Arum is on DAZN. And the idea, what popped into my head was, do you remember the botched invasion when it was WWF versus ECW and WCW? And then they started calling it the Alliance. And I'm seeing there, and it's like, we're going to have literally WWF because that's who owns Zuffa Boxing. And then on the other hand, you've got all the other promoters that are like the Alliance. Now, you know that certain entities that invest in one company also invest in the other company. I'm going to choose my words carefully on that one. And so what if one day someone wakes up and says, you know what, let's just sync this. Let's just put I always thought, what if they put all the boxing promoters on the DAZN ship and then just sync DAZN one day? I mean, and then what happens? I mean, so the wrestling analogies are there. And yeah, these are going to be weird times, I'm telling you. But I understand what Dana's saying. Look, Dana can't be in a world, and I don't want to. I'm not one of these guys who wants to make a Dana personalize it because it's a multi-gazillion-dollar conglomerate. But Dana can't be in a world where he puts over a fighter and then he wakes up the next morning and the WBA says, "Whoa, you need to throw this guy in the main event or you lose your belt." I mean, seriously, could you imagine? He just had Conor McGregor, and then they throw some bomb. Oh, he's our sanctioning. Oh, you're going to lose this? Dana can't deal with these people. When I first got into this, there were some shady characters that I Googled, and I got really scared of because that wanted to do business with me. And I'm like, yeah, Dana White talks to the president. He can't talk to these people. He has to insulate himself. This is a publicly traded company. So, the whole gangster element and all the bad stuff of boxing, which isn't there, but there's always going to be a whiff of it. They can't be anywhere near that stuff.
Dakota?
If you don't mind, I would love to ask you about something from the last card you did in Jersey, because I saw my friend Josh Popper was on the card, and I saw the statement that you made after the fight. Can you give a little context on that one?
Oh my God. This is the stuff that gets me in trouble. All right. I don't care. Let's roll with it. So I get a call on Thursday. So the way these fights get made, it's like Josh Popper, who, again, from an international standpoint, he's a heavyweight, 6-0. He was the one that dated Madonna, blah, 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 blah.
And very talented.
Very talented, ringmaster champion, nice guy, blah, blah, blah. Josh is also from my hometown. So when I came back to do regional boxing, the idea was I wanted to do a minor league. I can't be top rank. So I wanted to draw a circle around Atlantic City, find the local kids, give them a platform, build them up, and do that. So I've been trying to take Josh Popper pro, and there was some whatever. So Josh goes and, we finally get him on the card in November, and I wanted him on this card. And there's an opponent problem. The opponents and his opponents are usually way too good or way too bad. This time, it was way too bad. And on paper, there was nothing that would have gotten this guy provable. He was a 1-on-1 fighter. whatever. So I don't know. I get a call that he can't check into the hotel room. Can I show up to the casino? So okay, I I'm at my mom's house when I do these flights in Atlantic City, so I'm from, and so I'm about 15 minutes away. I get in the car, I drive to the casino, I text him, I'm like, hey, I'm at the front desk, let me check you in. And I see this guy coming down the elevator or the escalator, and I just start shaking my head. I'm like, oh my God, this flight's gonna last 14 seconds. Like, and I don't want to go on the roast that I might have done to some of my friends because this is gonna be public. I'll just say that so. All right. So then they had words at the weigh-ins, the two of them. Again, you could ask Josh down the road, but let's just say it wasn't caught on video, so I don't feel comfortable repeating what may or may not have been said. But something was said. So Josh was really mad at this kid. And so now this visual coming out with this guy who looks like those idiots that you always see on Instagram that like dress up like Macho Man Randy Savage and Dusty Rhodes. Like this was like that when he was doing it for Butterbean. And he's wearing the Butterbean shorts and he's coming out. And, but the backstory was I had booked Josh Popper and Justin Figueroa, the other local guy, Mr. Atlantic City just in time, to do a return to their high school. So my whole idea going into this was we were going to do a rally at their high school. And, how many promoters are going to go bring back the two local kids, back to their high school because they both went to the same high school. And that was my local idea for this show. Well, again, this was the only opponent that I could have gotten approved by his management company. So this was the fight. This was the fight we had. I can tell you that we are in negotiations right now to try to do something much better for the June fight. I can't announce it, but because it's not done yet. But I'm working on something. Hopefully with Josh in June, that everyone will be like, oh, that's actually very interesting.
Okay, I got another question for you. Lack of British boxing club shows. I'm not sure how big you are on the British boxing club scene, but that's something that a lot of our listeners, they're big British boxing fans. And I'm curious if you see any correlation because the British fans are upset the regional shows aren't as prominent as they were 3 years ago. Is there any correlation to what's happening in the U.S.?
There's got to be, but, in the UK, you see boxers that have like 50 losses on their records still fighting on those club shows. And, the opponents, if a fighter has like 2 or 3 losses in a row, 2 knockouts in a row or 5 losses in a row, they ain't ever fighting out over here. All right. At least in New York and New Jersey. I might have the formula a little off, so don't hold me to that exact one because it's slightly different in both states. So I know the B-sides are easy, but I can only imagine that the economics are just as brutal as they are here because the BBOC has very strict medical requirements. It's one of the only international medical commissions that U.S. commissions will accept their medicals. If you're from if you're from one of these crazy countries and you send in an MRI from that crazy country, New Jersey doesn't even gonna they're not even gonna look at it. They're gonna say, come here to, Inspira or one of the big, NYU Langhorne or somewhere and get a test on proper thing. We're not accepting those things. If you're fighting there, you're doing the same medicals as there. I don't know the exact economics, but I can imagine that it's just as brutal as it is here. Like it's absolutely as brutal. And the way to make some of these fights is, again, I wanted to feature Josh Popper and bring him back to his high school. I had to have the Butterbean. And again, I don't want to say Butterbean because that's insulting the Butterbean. Okay. I mean, that's insulting the Butterbean, really. I mean, Butterbean.
Yeah, he couldn't fight like Butterbean.
But I mean, you see the visual, and then there's this picture of this like sloppy dude just slaying down, and Josh was talking shit to him while he was hitting him, and and it's just the visual was just embarrassing for everybody involved. And again, there's nothing you can do about it. We have best intentions. You can't hit a home run every time, but again, this is life of a club promoter, and the argument will be on the other side was, look at Mike Tyson's first 15 opponents. That's where Josh is at. You get a warm body, you get a knockout. You get a warm body, you get a knockout. But or you get a guy that's 15-0, and it's like, are you gonna risk a possible potential prospect who can move on to those next levels, on a club show against a guy like that? The answer is, of course not. So then it becomes a negotiation between the manager, me, the fighter, the commissions, all of us. What's the most palatable guy? Who's bad enough for you to accept, but good enough for us to accept? And it's painful. It is unfun. It's painful. You can't just say, hey, I want to put these two guys up against each other. Oh, well, I got to get paid for that. I know what I'm worth. No, you're only worth on the club circuit how many tickets you sell. I don't care how many Instagram followers you have. You're only worth how many tickets you sell. And if you sell a bunch of tickets and you put on a crappy fight, and I got everybody yelling bullshit, then you know what? What good was it? So it's very difficult, and because I don't know the UK market, but I can just assume, knowing that they have the same extensive medical tests that we have. It's probably going to cost. It's going to cost at least $2-3 grand in testing before they even pay a purse.
So I've got two final questions, but I'll throw it to Dakota just to see if he has any ones before I wrap up.
I guess very simple question, but what is the next card that you'll be throwing?
I just got the date affirmed today. We're going to be doing June 13th, Saturday night at Tropicana. We're going to be doing Saturday night. It's going to be. I know there's going to be a couple other shows on that same night, but we're going to be in other states. But we're going to be the night after Ring of Combat Mixed Martial Arts. Will be there on Friday night. Tropicana is basically looking to tie the two of us together. I have I don't have it in front of me, but I have John Leonardo is definitely confirmed. He's fighting a 7-2 or a 9-2 guy. I've got a couple other fighters confirmed. I'm working on something with Josh right now, but it's, again, until I have a contract signed, and I got nothing. But
because we've seen some other really good heavyweights on your cards too. If it's Earl Newman or some of these some of Arias.
And again, also Luda Bella's guy, and that's again the unspoken thing about being a club promoter is when I put on the Luis Arias and those are and some of those guys. That's because Luda Bella, who has been a mentor to me and doing a lot of this stuff, he if he's not put on a fight, he's got to keep his guy active. All of a sudden, so it's cheaper for him to pay for and put a fight on my card than it is for him to do a whole card, because he's got to position his heavyweight so he can go put him on another card. So that's sort of where those fights come from, and unfortunately, it's hard to plan around them. Most of the show that we did last time was, again, it was all locals, and we had an upset. The female fight was a real upset, and I also wanted to make a shout out to Leah Lewandowski. And the difference is the men fighters in the club circuit are very protective, and they don't want to fight anybody. The women, because of the lack of opportunity, they're willing to fight. And she went in there in a tough fight. We're gonna bring her back. But it was a tough fight, and the women are willing to take the kind of fight that the men boxers won't take. But of course, the men boxers are never going to say that. They're just going to say, "Oh, they don't want to offer me the money. Oh, the promoter's this. Oh, and it's like, oh, I need to make this. I need to make that." And it's like, bro, where's the money coming from? It's like, you've been to Sony Hall. Like, I'm not going to fit another 1,000 people in that venue. Like, it's bad enough that the venue is so small and we have to have, certain ticket prices that is not the way we do it in Atlantic City, but it's just what you have to do in New York, and it's difficult. But our next fight will be in Atlantic City, and I'm actually, I talked to Lou today. We're working on, I'm working on a return to New York City because, I love promoting fights here. That was actually what got me into doing boxing. I always, we had a great run at Sony Hall for, like I said, 12 shows. And, when we come back, it'll be something, pretty cool.
Well, and I would like to add too, having grown up going to those kinds of shows, like the New York City Ballroom Show, that was how you came up, right? Where we're from. It was like when I was a kid, my favorite fighters were like Roy Jones, Arturo Gatti, and then like Edgar Santana. So there was always like, you know what I mean? There was always that like club circuit that was in the mix. And it still feels like those shows you do at Sony Hall have that feel. So I've always appreciated those.
So when we did the amateur show, and sometimes it's luck. If I was in some warehouse, it wouldn't be the same vibe. When we were in the amateur show, and I remember being right on top of the action in that room, I said, "This is like being on drugs for boxing. Like you could just feel the punches. You're there. It's this energy." And that was what I loved about coming back to Sony Hall. There's just a raw energy being in those fights. And then those, the time when we did the Avius Griffin title fight, or Andy Dominguez's fight, or Kurt Scooby's fight, or some of the fights we had with some of the bigger names that have come through. The electricity, because it was a small room, was just. It was incredible versus it being in a bigger room. Tropicana has a different energy, but Tropicana is, that was a place where I grew up going to Don Elbaum's fights, early on. It was, that was when I was a kid. Tuesday night fights at Tropicana was my dad would drop me and my two friends off. We go to fights. He plays slots. 3 hours later, we go home. That was hey, that was my babysitter. And that was how I grew up, going to all these fights in Atlantic City. And that was why I got the bug, because I had more fun going to a small club fight, in a casino ballroom that was completely empty, where they would basically tell anyone there, "Give us tickets. Here's free tickets. We got to fill it up for TV. It's going to be on USA Network at 2:00. Cedric Kushner's got a show. There's 4 tickets sold, but it's on TV. Bring all your friends." And sometimes you go to them and they be stinkers. Sometimes you'd be in that room with 4 people and they had the greatest fights you ever saw in your life. And that was what got me hooked on boxing. And that's what I try to do at Sony Hall. That's what we try to do there. But again, it's a hard, you have to thread a needle in the fights. Like, again, I could just take 2 guys that you've never heard of and make a 4-round fight, but you don't care about them. But if it's the local hometown kid, but how hard can you push them? How hard can you, you don't want, you're not trying to get somebody knocked out in the first round. That's the local draw. But on the other hand, it's difficult, and it's becoming more difficult in the last year, 2 years, to do this. So the answer is, I don't know what the future is going to be for club promoting anywhere, because again, if the end goal is to get into the UBO that the UFC is going to do, and Dana was clear, he's not, once they understand what UBO is, Top Rank might wake up the next morning and say, we were against it, but this is kind of a better business model. We're going to go do a UBO the same way it's all done in MMA. At that case, if you want to be in their model, why are they going to come through us? I don't know. And I don't know what the pipeline is going to be. And the truth is, nobody knows what the pipeline is going to be, because they're going to try to create their own pipeline.
Okay, so one of my big questions in concluding this is, what is the difference between a big promoter and a small promoter in, we'll say, 2027? How would you define the two, and what do they look like?
I'm looking for it right now in my drawer. Money. Listen to this. I'm putting my fights for free on YouTube. That's, you know what? I've had some of our fights air on DAZN. We got like nothing. All right. I mean, it's what they pay for small promoters. It's not what they pay Aram. And of course, the perception was great. They were great to deal with. But so what's the difference? The difference is every nickel that I can afford to spend on a fight, on a fighter, on an appearance, anything I get, the money has to come from ticket sales and sponsorships. Now, some of these fighters, they sell tickets. Okay, well, they sell tickets to pay for their out-of-town B-side. Because, again, people don't understand the B-side fighters make a lot more than the A-side fighters, especially on this circuit, because you're paying a guy who knows he's being brought in to lose in most cases. I mean, that doesn't always happen. But then there's the travel, there's the hotels, there's the medicals. It adds up. And so that's the hardest part right now. And no one wants to fight anybody.
The final thing I wanted to ask, and then I don't know if Dakota has any other questions before we maybe wave to you and say thank you for a good interview, is the music rights issues, because what did you say, Larry?
No, I said thank you for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Right on. We might get you as a reoccurring guest on certain topical issues. Real fun. The thing I wanted to talk about is the music rights issues, because for YouTube early on, I was making videos and I always remembered getting demonetized or even getting a copyright strike for putting my favorite song to a boxer, and being so frustrated in 2015 around the music rights. And I see other people get their videos with that and just the frustrations around. And I read your article about doing a live stream and then it got demonetized and actually the private, you couldn't see it, you couldn't go back and watch it. And I want to talk about the frustrations around music licensing for boxing streaming, because I think that that's a different conversation for a different day. But I'd like you to explain your issues with it, because I think that's something nobody thinks about.
I never thought about it before. The answer is yes. We put these videos up, and you go type in the Andy Dominguez Byron Rojas fight, which, by the way, should have been 2025's fight of the year. The two of them left it all in the ring in Tropicana last July, but because I'm an indie promoter and that I couldn't get that publicity. That was literally probably the best. That was by far the best fight we ever did, and that aired on DAZN. The Tropicana clears music rights. These fighters, they all, the one kid brought the local marching band to bring them out. One dude brings all the strippers from the local strip club to walk them to the ring. They all have their elaborate, entrances. Okay. So, I want to come up with this. So again, if you go to YouTube right now and watch the Andy Dominguez fight, you're going to get hit with a commercial. Money doesn't go to me. I'm not making the 12 cents I should make off that video. Some music right holder is wearing that. So when the fighter goes, hey, I want to come up to Nipsey Hussle, I don't care what do I care? The new DJ plays it. Okay. It airs live. Then I go home, I go out, all of a sudden, there's something wrong with the stream. Oh, okay. I'm like, I can't figure it out. I had to run it through Grok to figure out how to fix it. And then I explained, I had to delete the song. And then I call my producer. I'm like, Mike, what do I do? And he's just like, well, that's not my fault. I'm like, nobody said it was your fault, but my video's offline. So we finally deleted it. It popped back up. It's demonetized and commercials air. But yeah, if you play the wrong music, they will pull your video offline. And that was awful. The solution for next time is I'm gonna run it on 2 or 3 other platforms at the same time. I just wanted to send everyone to one funnel, but so that's the fail safe. And then the other fail safe is to basically cut the introductions or play public rights music. This is why WWE has all their own musical videos, because or if you go in the WWE network or wherever they're airing it now, you watch an old Hulk Hogan match, he wasn't coming out to Jimi Hendrix anymore when they play those things, because who wants to pay for the money? And so to pay for the rights for that, but yet the fighter wants to come out to his favorite song, so it becomes sort of we're going to work on that for next time. And for next time, I'm going to have, I'm probably just going to, put public rights music in the intros. Like we're going to figure out how to mute that. Cause I was told by the producer, if it's just incidental music in the background, they don't care. But the problem is the commentators stop talking and all you hear is that song mixed with them, and the algorithm just flags you immediately. And it takes you 15 minutes so our show lost the chance of going viral that night after the fight, like it normally would, to people sending it around, because we were offline for 12 hours. And, it won't happen again. I got an article out of it, but it was, just one more L that we had to take, trying to be a club promoter. And it's not easy.
I want to offer a production possibly idea. What if you just take out the audio and then that's the broadcaster's job to do some form of a segue of a backstory or some details, and then you just air the walkout, but the broadcasters are talking during that walk-in and the music's pulled?
That's exactly what we're going to have to do next time. because what happened this time didn't work. We have a few options. I use a producer who shoots a lot of indie boxing and indie wrestling and MMA. So he's dealt with this before, but most people don't like. I'm most of these people. This wouldn't have happened if we were airing on another network or anywhere else. It's a YouTube situation, but I personally feel the move for a club promoter should be zero barrier to entry. You shouldn't have to pay $20 to watch it on some weird streaming service because, but I get it. I'm leaving money on the table. I mean, believe me, and every nickel counts doing a club show, but look, I can't do a $100,000 HBO production, on a shoestring budget, which again is what we're doing. And again, I base this on, indie wrestling, like what GCW and some of these small companies do on Triller. Like that's the level of production that an indie boxing promoter can do. That was kind of production Ludabella was doing with Broadway Boxing. That's the kind of promotion that, Joe DeGuardi does with Star Boxing. There's a certain level that we as independent promoters can do, but it's not at an HBO level. It's, if I was HBO, I would have just made 2 phone calls. My lawyers would have made a few phone calls and I would have gotten the music cleared. I would have my channel whitelisted. DAZN is whitelisted. Even if they make a mistake, they're not going to get shut down, but they don't, I'm a nobody. They're going to whitelist me tomorrow. If I never post another thing on YouTube, I don't think Google gives a crap, it doesn't matter.
Okay, Dakota, do you have any other questions?
I think that's all I can think of for the time being, but it's definitely been awesome getting to talk to you a little bit, Larry, and get some insight on what it's like to be a club promoter in 2026, because I could see why it would be challenging, but to hear it firsthand has been really interesting. And I look forward to seeing more of your shows in the city, man.
Well, you're all invited to Atlantic City in June. The thing is, it's like whatever can go wrong. I mean, I've had, we did a show in February. We had 6 fights. Avius Griffin won the U.S. title. And then there was snow. We lost a fight. Guy pulled out. We lost 3 fights. We had a 3-fight. I lost 3 fights on fight week. I had a fight, Andy Dominguez's card in May. Literally, the fight was on Friday. On Monday, I get a call from someone in the media, I cannot say who, tells me that our opponent is just fat. I mean, we had a 108-pound title fight, which leaves a 3-pound differential. He has to, if he wants to even fight. The kid was like 15 pounds over. And in New York, if you advertise it as such and such, it was Andy Dominguez versus Nelvis something, Nelvis Rodriguez, and Nelvis was 50. We were told that if we couldn't deliver that fight, everybody has to get a disaster city. We had to pull the plug on a show 3 days before the plug. Like, what I mean? Like who thinks about that stuff? I had to call Sony Hall. They're still mad at me for canceling that show. And so that it's really just a matter of, my matchmaker, Eric Botcher, says, look, just so you understand, you do this for 5 more years, you've got good relationships, you're always going to have fighters stabbing you in the back and then coming back the next day. You're always going to have this, you're always going to have that, you're always going to have, bottom feeders, scumbag promoters trying to steal what you created over here or steal this or whatever. You're always there's going to be good people. But it's really one of these things where my friend, I have a friend, Rico Ciparelli, who in the old days was a big MMA wrestling trainer. He was the one who put Randy Couture and Matt Lindland and all those guys in the UFC in the very early days. And he sends me a text the other day when I was telling him what was going on. And he says, man, he's like, your moral compass, like, you're a good dude. Like, your moral compass doesn't allow you to be in the cesspool with these pigs that you're in there with. And it gets to you because I gotta be me. I gotta do a handshake. You'll run into me at some point in the world. If I'm not doing this, I'm gonna do something else. But man, like, you've experienced things in boxing. I've learned things. Like, I've learned every underhanded way to do business because it's been perpetrated on me. I've watched people set up situations, wait a year in waiting just to pounce on a random Tuesday afternoon just to get, and it's like, yeah, bro, we're all gonna like see each other again. Like, people, and it's maddening because it's all like low level con man stuff, and in a lot of ways, if Zuffa Boxing comes into boxing and knocks every bad person out of the sport and monopolizes it, I don't like using that word, and they knock everybody out, me included, and a lot of these bad guys, it might not be the worst thing. So, like I said, boxing historically has had a lot of bad actors in it, and that's why we need That's why that is why boxing is the only sport in the world that is regulated by the freaking government. When I do a show in New Jersey, and this is another future article, I deal with the New Jersey Athletic Control Board is literally an office of the Attorney General. Like, if they thought any of us were spitting on the sidewalk, we are dealing with the Attorney General. Believe me, when they send you an email, you pay a lot of attention to it. It's not like when people talk about the athletic commissions, they think if it's just like some gym teacher somewhere. And it's like, no. This is the Attorney General's office. They answer to people that wouldn't hesitate for putting all three of us in jail because, for 10 years because we ran a red light or texting and driving or whatever it is. It's like, and so it's, I know I have to be above board, and I love the regulations because of that reason. But I can tell you, the matchmakers and the people in boxing they get infuriated because of just the amount of tedious work that it takes to put on these fights. So again, if you don't love boxing and you don't love what it represents from a purist level, like I said, in Atlantic City, we do the Atlantic City Police Athletic League show. I invite hundreds of kids to these fights with free tickets. If you're not in it for the community and the love of the game, if you're just in it to steal money, unless you can get your hands on Floyd Mayweather, and I was told it very early on, if you get Floyd Mayweather, Al Heyman's going to steal Floyd Mayweather, and you're going to be left with nothing but a legal bill. There's easier ways to make a buck. So yeah, again, I that's the future of club boxing.
Okay, well, it was great to have you on, Larry. We're probably going to take you out as we talk about a few topical things, but anything you want to say on the way out?
No, nothing. Like I said, I appreciate you guys having me on. This was a lot of fun. I appreciate some of the coverage you guys have given me to do this. This has been a labor of love, and it's not easy. And we said I'm hoping to have a few more of these this year, but I'm gonna segue also a little bit back into the media world, doing the articles that we've discussed, where I have insights into this that I'm not saying I'm a genius. I only have them because I've been through the regulatory process that not many people have been through. And a lot of what people are saying is misinformation. And look, I didn't learn until last night that you want to make Zuffa the boogeyman. I didn't understand until I really did a deep dive into the research that it was a congressman that screwed up the TKO Muhammad Ali bill. And that's a problem because, it wasn't them that wanted to tie everybody up with this drug testing situation, but it doesn't matter. That's what's in the bill.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Larry. We're going to jump on to the next part of our show, and we're going to jump into Dakota, who was there live for the Top Ranked DAZN card.
Yeah, so as you may or may not know, obviously Lukey knows, but Top Rank and DAZN announced a multi-year streaming partnership today at Madison Square Garden in New York City, my hometown. They had several of their, bright young champions on the panel: Abdullah Mason, Emiliano Vargas, Shushu Carrington, Keyshawn Davis, and of course some executives from both companies, and a funny and nice message from Bob Arum, who was not there because he had a knee injury of sorts. But listen, bro, I just think that, and we've talked about it since July, when their deal with ESPN ended, there's a certain void in boxing that Top Rank fills that I think has been very much felt since they haven't had a streaming deal, and since we've had to go to these kind of like alternative viewing places to watch them that are a little more random. And I'm excited just to have them back on a major platform that I'm already paying for, thankfully, that will be easy to see, that will add value to a very premiumized subscription. There's some details that we don't really know. We don't know what the date of the first show is going to be. We don't know what the production is going to look like, but what we do know is that Top Rank is going to be on DAZN for the next couple of years. So you don't have to wonder where that stable is going to wind up anymore.
What was the sentiment there live? What was the feeling with the executives, with the fighters? What did you sense?
I kind of sensed a little relief, man. I mean, I think that this is something they've been working on for a little bit, and I think both the DAZN and the Top Rank side were maybe surprised. If not surprised, maybe a little bit regretful that it took as long as it did.
Any insight from Emiliano Vargas or Bruce Carrington, maybe even Keyshawn Davis, who was there? Any insight that you got for what's going on with them?
Well, listen, man, I think that they're obviously all excited to kind of be back in the limelight a little more, right? I think that there's like a whole section of talent that hasn't been forgotten, but they're like in the back of your mind now because you're not seeing them, in the day-to-day of boxing media. You don't see them at the weigh-ins because they're not on the cards. But I think that, for Shushu, and I could speak to him the most, I would say, having spoken to him, but I just think the kid wants to unify. There's way more opportunities for him to do that now than there was prior because everybody's fighting on the same network. The Espinoza fight was an option anyway, but I think that's a fight that he really wants. And for Emiliano, listen, man, like we talked about, we're talking about a 21-year-old guy. And I think people forget that he's that age because he's had as many fights as he is, because when you talk to him, like, he is a composed, well-spoken dude that doesn't come off like a kid. And he's excited, I think, to kind of get into a newer market, maybe get some new eyes on him. He even mentioned at one point to me fighting at Wembley is like a thing that he wants to do before his career is over.
Interesting. Another topical thing. I'm not sure how much you know about this one, but Mikaela Mayer made news this week. Mikaela signed with MVP. What are your thoughts on that move?
I mean, shit, bro, it makes a lot of sense, right? I mean, they're starting MVPW on ESPN, which is going to really highlight and put at the forefront women's boxing. And at the moment, they have some fighters that are in her weight neighborhood. I don't see why, if you're Mikaela Mayer, you wouldn't want to jump in to that swimming pool over there, man. Yeah.
Also, for your friend Shadeja, that might be a fight for Shadeja down the road.
Sure, it could be. It could be a fight for Tam Tebow. I think that because of Mikaela's ability to fight in different weight classes, much like Terry Harper, she's one of those fighters that has more options than your average fighter. And I think MVP can lay those options out for her as well, if not better than anybody going right now.
Okay, now let's go to Arnold Barboza beating Kenny Sims. What were your thoughts on this?
That was a great performance, man. Like, I enjoyed that fight. I know for certain kinds of fight fans, maybe that was a little sleepy, but I think that Arnold is a hell of a fighter. I think Kenny's a hell of a fighter. Kenny's been one of my favorites for years, right? I was back in the day trying to get Kenny Sims versus Teofimo. That was the fight I wanted to see. I thought Arnold was really great in this fight, man. He stayed composed. He knows his range. He has a really good instinct for when you land. He kind of goes and gets his get back real quick and evens out the exchange and then gets back to his work, but he does it quick. He's tremendous, man. And I think at welterweight, he's got the frame for it. He's got the footwork for it. I think he hits just hard enough that you don't, get silly coming inside on him. And I thought he did a great job, especially in that first half, of just making Kenny come in second a little bit. A lot of the rounds were close, but he had Kenny coming in second, and then like 8 or 9 hit, and he just took off and separated himself down the stretch. And I thought it was a beautiful performance.
Yeah, it was. For me, I didn't find it boring. I didn't find it fascinating, but the boring blame goes to Kenny, because Barboza was fighting his fight and Kenny wasn't making those adjustments. To me, the battle was an identity battle. I've talked about this a little bit on my YouTube in a hotel bathroom, but uh, Barboza knows who he is. And if you don't break him out of doing what he does, we've seen certain fighters be able to give him issues. Sean McComb, Teofimo Lopez, various reasons. One guy really tall, awkward. Another guy, Teofimo, generational fighter who, when he's on, he's very difficult and he's got really good reflexes. That being said, he has an identity and he throws a certain amount of volume. He can control distance, fight at range. Feels like Kenny Sims has kind of gotten away from what made him a fascinating elite fighter to me in recent memory since the Batir fight. And I think 2023, he was in the pocket banging a lot in that fight. And
Duarte fight.
And in this fight, I was really surprised. And not that I'm a game plan guy, because another hot take. If you don't do 6 to 8 weeks in camp with somebody, I don't think you should offer half-baked analysis, because part of coaching is the suffering and the monotonous grind. But I was a little confused that he wasn't hitting him with foot feints and drawing him in, because it was appearing that Barboza really understood what to do when he was trying to press him. And I was kind of surprised. It was almost like the Stephen Shaw willingness to get hit after a loss, where he was looking to be more aggressive and come forward. And I don't think of Kenny Sims as a guy where that's his most elite attribute, is pressing and coming forward. I think of him as someone who can think, foot feint, walk guys into shots. And it felt as though Barboza saw what he was doing, locked in, got in autopilot. And I was very shocked at how Sims was unable to kind of adjust or even try different things. It just felt like he was trying the same thing more and more.
Yeah, and to be fair, he didn't, at least visibly, like he didn't look like he was in the best shape I've ever seen him in, right? It looked like there were things about him at times that, like, it was still Kenny Sims, but it felt like he was just losing exchanges 3-2, 4-2. And he wasn't able to up that intensity. If he wanted to be the come forward guy, he wasn't able to up that foot pressure and close the gap and make it physical and make it uncomfortable. The things that he wanted to do, it seemed like he was having trouble doing, and the things that we're sort of used to seeing him do, he wasn't doing either. And I have to be honest, I have to wonder at times with Kenny's health, obviously with what he told you with the sickle cell in your interview with him back in the day. There's no way, because we know boxing is not a video game. There's no way for me, when I see a fighter like him that's been so good through the years, just look a little flat. He's a human being, bro. How am I not going to say, like, yeah,
when he's had hard fights? He's had hard fights.
He's got hard fights. There's health problems. Like, you just don't know how a guy's feeling on the night,
Weigh in, I felt Kenny looked a little sucked in, and I felt like Arnold looked too healthy. That was like my observation
bro. I think Arnold's a real welterweight, and I think he's a handful for anybody in the division, honestly.
I think that a lot of people underrate the greatness of Barboza because he's humble and he doesn't deviate from what makes him win. And people like flash. He's not an Instagram fighter. He's highly effective. He came from the club circuit, and he built an identity, and he knows his identity. His identity is, I'm going to outwork you. I'm going to be in better shape. I'm going to fight a disciplined fight. I'm not going to lose focus. And the guys that have given him issues are the guys that can still kind of do a thing while he's doing that. He never really gets beat. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I just think, especially after the Teofimo fight, at least for me, it felt like, well, I didn't see a world where Teo won that fight. And I have to put some of the blame on Arnold for not showing the intensity that I expected. And especially since we don't always know what we're getting with Teofimo, I felt like I knew what I was getting with Arnold. And so when he lost that fight, in my mind, it's like, okay, well, maybe he's less of a top 5 guy and more of a 6th man. And I think this fight sort of helped to remind you, like, no, this is a top 5 guy. You know what I mean? He just lost to a special guy who doesn't always put his best foot forward, but is a generational athlete.
How good is Oscar Collazo? Like, are we pound for pound level yet? Or what do you think?
I'm not. I'm just going to keep it a buck, bro. I think he's really good. I enjoy watching him. If he's on, I'm making sure I'm tuned in because I think he's entertaining and I think he's talented. Again, though, like Ken Shiro, I just see a level of hitability that it's hard for me to put that type of fighter in a pound for pound conversation for me.
Yeah, I don't know. I know Jesus Haro is my guy. He won a bunch of national championships. He hasn't quite put it together as a pro, but to me, it's a good, solid win. I saw people being critical of it. He just has to get to that point. He has to unify, which I feel like he's the best guy in the division. But I think whether it's fair or not, 105-pound men's division, you have to wonder what the handful of talent is. And whether right or wrong, probably unify in 3 divisions. You probably have to go up to 108, but really I'd say most hardcore enthusiasts start watching boxing at a 112. I'd say a lot of hardcore fans are not familiar with 108 and 150, 105.
It's probably more guys, though, that they are familiar with at 108 than at 105. I mean, I don't think I could tell you the top 10 at 105, but I could name some fighters down at junior flyweight. You know what I mean?
I think that's the issue is he beat the legendary 105 fighter in that Golden Boy card about roughly a year and a half ago. He
Who was
beat
it?
the guy,
Who was it again?
knockout KC, knockout.
I know
You know what I mean? It's the gym. He has a gym name. He's already unified Mankey Crazy saying also Lionel Watson in the chat looked like Arnold on a great night and Sims on a horrible night. I guess what I didn't mean unify. I mean, he has to be like undisputed at 105, go up to 108, fight the best guys there, dominate there. And then really unfairly, it's like, to me, he's kind of like Chocolatito. Roman Chocolatito.
There's a type of dominate, Lukey. Like, I think that when we saw Chocolatito, he was such a specimen, right? That even though he was getting hit, the way he was laying guys, he was doing shit to other fighters you just didn't see smaller guys do. Like, Collazo is dominant, but we've seen him get buzzed, right? Like, we've seen these moments of vulnerability against guys that I'm not familiar with, and I'm a boxing guy. So when I see that, okay, I think that you're a tremendous fighter, but can I put you in the same conversation as Bam and Shakur Stevenson and David Benavidez? I don't see it on a skill level. For me, the weight doesn't matter.
Gabriela Fundora, possibly the best women's boxer in the world right now.
She's working on it, bro. She's fucking working on it.
I mean, if the person that she's fighting isn't a pound for pound level women's boxer, are we getting to the point of just writing down TKO or KO? Because it just seems like any challenger who hasn't had that world-class experience and world-class wins just can't compete with her. The only bummer is she's going down to 108. It feels like the scintillating matchups are actually the opposite way. It feels like they're 115, 118 are the better matchups. But at the same time, if that's what she wants to do. If she wants to go to 108, win a belt there, where I think she could be a 6 or 7 division world champion. So I'm never mad at someone that's like, let me get as many belts as possible. But this is something special, bro. Like what she's doing is like, I think she's normalizing a level of elite fighting that isn't normal. And people are just now looking at it and going, oh, that's Gabriela Fundora. It's almost like a Golovkin thing she's got going, where people are normalizing Golovkin stopping #1 contenders when a lot of guys go the distance with him. But because it's Golovkin, oh, we'd never heard of this guy. But it's like having these professional performances. I'm really impressed with her, bro.
I am too, man. And I thought that Ruiz actually made an adjustment. At one point in the fight, it was like in the 3rd round or whatever, she started being able to move her head, get on the inside, and punch with Gabriela and got some nice work done. And then what great fighters do is adjust to the adjustment. And she figured out, okay, I do have to keep her on the end of the shots. And so she did that, dominated the rest of the fight, gets a stoppage. Looks like she has the frame to go up to fucking featherweight in her next fight, lightweight. Like, I don't know. I think that she's got the frame to fight at any weight class she wants. I don't know why she would want to go down, but like you said, bro, I do think she's working on being the best female fighter in the world. And if she wants to go down in weight, go up in weight, she can do whatever the fuck she wants, man. She's a star.
Okay, undercard. Also, Mankey Crazy. Collazo goes for the body, so he gets hit more. That's his observation. A couple of any undercard standouts. Joel Iriarte, you sent me a text about him. Caden Griffiths is a lot of fun. Grant Flores training with Robert Garcia. That was interesting to see. Those were kind of like the big takeaways that I saw.
Well, listen, bro. I think Joel Iriarte is a hell of a fighter, and I think that the skills are obvious. It's sort of he reminds me a lot of Diego Pacheco, where I see all of the pieces. For me, at least, like Diego, I think he's very similar to Diego. Sometimes there's an intensity component that I'm not quite seeing, and it makes me kind of check out a little because the rounds all start to look the same. I don't think that speaks to whether he's like beatable or not. I think he's a very tough out. But that's a thing I've noticed, that maybe as he moves up in weight and doesn't, whatever the case may be, that gets better. I also think it's worth noting, like, Jojo Diaz showed a lot of balls against Alexis Rocha, man. And it was obviously a wide win for Rocha. And we see kind of the direction that Jojo's career has taken over the last couple of years. But he don't got nothing to be ashamed of on that one, man. He made the fight. He was throwing combinations. He never once got anywhere near buzzed. And I just think showed a level of character and balls that, you can question his discipline and some of his habits outside the ring, but you can't question his skills, because a guy less skilled would have gotten knocked the fuck out, and you can't question his balls and his heart, because they wouldn't take those kinds of fights anyway. So, shout out to Alexis Rocha for staying composed, getting the job done. But I felt like Jojo made a real good case for himself doing whatever he wants with his career.
I also thought it was like, we didn't talk about this, but Alexis Rocha came in after the fight with Barboza, and, seems that might be set up as the next fight. Not a glowing endorsement for where Alexis Rocha is at. That's the other thing I couldn't take away is I've always been a huge Jojo fan. I think he's someone that really is really talented, but he's got that momentum's gotten away from him, maybe along with some parts of his life.
He's fighting guys so much bigger than him now.
I think there's the momentum thing too, because when he fought Abraham Montoya, that's a fight that he probably should have won, but he's so used to fights probably getting out of control that a close fight somehow goes the wrong way. This was cautionary for me with Rocha. Like, this felt like he had a lot of physical advantages. Yes, Diaz showed balls. Yes, he's better than I think on paper people give him credit. But Rocha is someone that's been in the mix for a title, and he's someone that can sell a lot of tickets. And I think that you look at this performance, if he fights Barboza, is there a world he can beat Barboza with a performance like this?
Probably not, but he still showed some of the things that I think could give Barboza a problem, which is that I do think he hits pretty hard, right? I don't know that Arnold's hit anybody or fought anybody, a real welterweight that's hitting like that. I think he's still got good hand speed. He throws creative combinations. He has a style that just kind of wins rounds. I would pick Barboza for sure to win that fight, but I still think it's an interesting matchup.
It's a good LA fight. It's a good LA fight, bro. Okay, let's get into our next topic. Next topic.
We'll let you start. I'll be right back.
Okay. So our next topic is what I think it might be the fight of the year. It's Najee Lopez. Just a sensational performance. I was going out of town for the weekend. So privileged, so awesome is me. And what did I see? I saw basically Najee Lopez had the best first round I had seen pretty much in all of boxing this year. Looks dominant, sharp, just on point. And then against Manuel Gallegos, just a hall of very good fighter, a guy that I absolutely have so much respect for. What does he do? Pressure, lulls you to sleep. Oh, you can hang out on the inside with me. No, you can't. You can't hang out on the inside with Manuel Gallegos. Head clash happens, blood coming from the eye of Najee. We got ourselves a fight. Oh, by the way, Najee gets dropped by Gallegos. Feels like the fight is getting out of control for Najee. And then what does he do? He does what those darn special fighters do. He gets up off the canvas and he stops Gallegos in an emotional and emphatic, and I dare say star-making performance. This is no hyperbole, the best fight I've ever seen on ProBox TV, and I should know because I think I've watched just about every fight on ProBox TV. This is one of those special moments that felt like the start of something else. And who knows how far our guy Najee Lopez goes in his career. But what I do know is Najee Lopez passed the Abdullah Mason, get knocked down, get back up, punch a guy in the face test. And this fight really just had an F yeah moment for both guys. Gallegos, I think, was very disrespected in the lead up to the fight, and he proved that he is a world-class fighter. And Najee proved that, to me, he's right there behind the Bivels and Better Beefs. If they're not named Bivol or Better Beef, he is capable of fighting any of those guys right now. And I just think that was just one of the, for me, that's the most enjoyable fight I've seen all year.
Couldn't agree more. I mean, it was truly, and there's like a version of that fight where like Najee just kind of outboxes him and stays on the end of a jab and is just better. But Gallegos has a way of like making shit happen that's not supposed to happen. There's the headbutt, then the cut happens. Then Gallegos is thrown to the body like a motherfucker. He hits so hard, you can hear it, you can see it. And all of a sudden, it's a really uncomfortable fight for Najee. That's like a character test that a lot of guys don't pass. Khalil Coe didn't pass it the first time. And Gallegos made that fight hell for him. And he just kept finding a way, man. He couldn't see, so he got in the pocket and was the better fighter on the inside. But he had to go through hell to get there. And just tremendous, bro. It put, now we know his character. We've known his skills and what he's like capable of just in terms of his athletic ability. But now we really know about his character. And
he could be a champion. He showed a championship spirit.
And it made it so that it's like, I would love to see him against, whoever wins between Morrell and Callum Smith. I would love to see him against Katayev. I would like it. It made me interested in seeing him against, the Josh Buatzis and the Anthony Yards and that, lower half of the top 10, top 15. Like, he's right there, bro. And if that ain't one of those guys, it's like, what are we waiting on?
Very good point. Rest of the card, Dominic Valle. He won a nail biter. Very close fight. I'm very high, probably higher than most people on Dominic. This was not his best performance. It felt as though the corner was a bit chaotic. The rest of the card was really entertaining. Dakota, did anything stand out to you on this ProBox card?
Bro, unfortunately, I just don't think Dominic won that fight, man. I think he got a little lucky on that one, and he's a really talented young fighter, and hopefully he can take some lessons away from that. But I don't see how he doesn't have a 1 on the end of his record after that.
It's an ugly fight, right? And the sense of urgency in the corner didn't really look like, I could see it maybe being a draw, but it didn't feel like he was in control of the fight the way that the scores said. And I think that the greatest tell is how the corners respond, because typically the corners have a sense of the fight, and it feels like things need to be reassessed. But I think there's an issue with Dominic to a certain extent where he's capable of boxing, but he wants to be a pressure fighter, and he ran into a guy that was better at fighting on the inside than him, and he needed to mix it up more. And I think we saw that there's like you hit me, I hit you, I'll fight you in the pocket, and he messed around and fought a guy at his fight. Goes one of two ways. This is the ceiling, or this is a fight you learn from.
And it was also like he was so much bigger. He's got way less wear and tear, but Ramirez is a vet, right? So he knows how to get through a fight with anybody, I would say, and was able to use his veteran tactics to be a little smarter. And it was like one of those where he just was working less hard. Like Valle was really having to put his heart and soul into staying in the fight. And it felt like for Ramirez, it was like another day in the office. And sometimes if I watch a fight like that and I feel like the decision's bad, I'll go on BoxRec because they have the fan scores, and I'll see like, are other people seeing this as well? I'm just looking right now. The fans had a 96.5 to 93.5 for Ramirez. So clearly I'm not crazy. Other people were seeing a fight that he was coming in second in, that Ramirez just looked like he was doing what he wanted to do more so than Valle was doing what he wanted to do.
Very well put. Let's go over to Jai Opetaia. We haven't talked since Jai Opetaia won. He beat Brandon Glanton. Any thoughts on that performance?
I thought we did. We didn't? Oh, right, because we're Sunday boys. Listen, bro, I haven't seen the fight. I've seen highlights. I think Jai's great, man. I'm not sure what that fight does for him. Clearly, like Larry was saying, there's times where guys don't really know what's going on in their careers. And sometimes I get that feeling on a bigger scale from Jai, where he's on stage for Zuffa Boxing and someone says, what do you want to do with your career? And he's like, I want to unify. And it's like, okay, you're not with the Unify boys though, dude. You're with the not unified boys. So I don't really know what this does for him.
To me, it was a weird performance, and I think that Jai is a really, really special fighter. I think he's a pound for pound level
And
talent.
it was very dominant as well.
But it also was kind of flat. It was kind of flat. And it's like a performance where he won it based on some of his attributes, but it felt beatable. And maybe that's wrong of me to say, but it's like, to me, when Jai looks the best, he looks better than Zordo. But Zordo's off nights look a lot better than Jai's off nights. Like, Zordo has a level of just being a 7 at all times, and sometimes he can be a 9, but he's a 7 across the board. Jai can be a 10 and a 5. Like, those are the level of performances you get. And it was hard for me to not look at this performance and go, maybe he's not as worried about this opponent. Maybe he feels there's a huge hand speed advantage. Maybe he's not fully locked in. There was a lot of title conversations. Now it's so long that I don't fully remember all this stuff. Maybe he wasn't fully locked in. Everyone says they're locked in, but maybe the level of enthusiasm you had for the fight, he had deep down, because I think he's a true competitor and he wants to fight the best guys. To me, it looked like a fight where he started to lose interest in the fight during the fight. That's what it looked like to me.
I would say I would agree. I looked generally like not the most passionate. Like, he was doing his job, but he wasn't loving what he was doing. It wasn't what woke him up that morning. And I think that aside from the fight itself, right, because I felt like it was a lateral move or even a half a step back. Zordo's fighting guys that beat Glanton. So there's levels. I didn't see the enthusiasm or the passion particularly. And it just, for me, I personally think the circumstances of the fight, him saying that he wants to be undisputed, fighting for the not undisputed boys, then he's wearing the belt, but he doesn't have the belt, but he does have the belt. And then Kellerman's telling him he's undisputed and he's like, no, I'm not. It was just a mess, bro. And if I'm a fighter, I don't want to hear about none of that shit. I want to go out there and do my job and get the best fight possible. And it just didn't feel like any of those things happened for him.
Okay, let's talk world title news. Your guy, Anthony Cacace, totally said it wrong, is their new WBA junior lightweight title holder. He beat Jazza Dickens. What are your thoughts, and what does this do to the junior lightweight division that now no longer has Lamont Roach Jr.? So we got Oshaki Foster, Emmanuel Navarrete, and now, another champion.
Well, full disclosure, I didn't get to see that one. There was a lot of boxing that weekend, and I just missed that one, unfortunately. But what I will say is it seems like he's the odd man out, right? Because you got Navarrete and Nunez just fought to unify. I think it's obvious that Shock and Ray Ford are going to fight at some point, and the winner will then fight Navarrete. So I think that does sort of leave Cacace on the outside looking in at the moment.
Feels like he's the Lewis Crocker of this division, where a lot of guys are going to call him out. Like, he's a well-distinguished two-time.
Who's calling out Lewis Crocker?
I feel like people call out Lewis Crocker at times, but for whatever reason the fight's not being made. But I feel like if you go and you get like a up and comer, they're like, okay, I want to fight Lewis Crocker. You know what I mean? There's always guys that are champions that I feel like a number 15 guy still feels like they could get him if they get the night. I feel like this is the guy in the division where, Shockey Foster's a tough fight. Navarrete's for sure a tough fight. Not to say that he's not a tough fight, but he's the most unbattle tested of two kind of long reigning champions now. How long has Shock had the belt? Maybe 3-4 years now. And Navarrete is going on a decade of holding a belt of some sort. So I just feel like he's probably going to be a European champion that takes on some European level guys. Wouldn't be shocked if there's like a Lee Wood fight that we get or something of that nature. But my first thought was he's the vulnerable champ right now.
He just feels real regional, bro. And sometimes with the Brit guys, because they are so insular, they have to have that breakout performance to get people's attention. Like Dalton Smith had to go and knock out Subriel Matias. I'm sure there's other examples of this that I'm not thinking of, but generally speaking, UK stars have to have that moment where it's not, the number one Brit versus the number two Brit. You got to break out of that and show other people that you can do it. And I just don't think he's really had that opportunity.
Well, I think their fans too also kind of view everything as a mega fight when it isn't, which is doesn't.
It is
help.
for them. That him versus Cordina. If you're a British boxing fan, that's a big deal. Outside of that, it's like a regional title fight. You know.
Yeah. So now we're gonna go to Carlos Adami's WBC middleweight champion taking on Austin Ammo Williams. What are your thoughts on this?
It's so hard for me to ever get a read on Adames. You know what I mean? He's had some real high highs and low lows kind of deal. Obviously, I think Hamza had long outgrown middleweight and just didn't have the best performance. But there's no doubt that Adames is a tricky guy. He's managed to stay in the mix for all these years. I remember seeing him at cards like 10 years ago when he was a prospect, and I thought, I don't know how long this guy will be around. Here I am, still talking about him. He's going to take Ammo Williams, who's one of the best young middleweights going right now. And I think it's a real 50-50 fight.
Yeah, I mean, I think the fight comes down to Adami's in the weight cut, because the thing about Ammo that I don't love is he gets hit clean. And this is a guy that you can't get hit clean by, quite frankly. Carlos Adami's is someone, if you get hit clean by, he's shown time and time again, he hits extremely hard. The thing about this fight, I think the X factor is Ammo Williams. He's the younger fighter. He's the more active fighter. He's been willing to take risks. He fought Hamzat Shiraz. He rebuilt himself. He built himself
That was a great
back
fight
up.
too.
He beat Patrice Volney, who I think a lot of people thought could upset him. He's shown merit, and then he looked, would you say, beyond average, taking a one-day notice opponent. That was not a great showing leading into this, which I think thins the enthusiasm. But then, like Adami's, feels like we see him fight once a year. He had a lot of momentum after he stopped Julian J. Rock Williams. Feels like that momentum is completely slowed down. It's a battle of two guys that I think are big unknowns to me, but in different regards. Adami's is so inactive, I don't know what he looks like. And with Williams, the unknown is, can he get to a level beyond this? Can he go beyond a main event fighter and be a world champion? I'm not sure, because he's shown some flaws.
Right. Like, here's your second try at this level. Hamza being the first try, but I've always kind of felt like he has it in him in terms of the skill. We'll see, mentally if he's got it in him too, but it looks like an elite level skill set.
Yeah. So that's kind of the story of that fight. Undercard, not the deepest undercard, if we're going to be honest. We got Omari Jones, 2024 U.S. Olympic bronze medalist. He'll be fighting on the undercard, taking a big experience step up in this fight. Taramona Jr., who I think reminds me so much of an Australian George Foreman. That was my first thought when I saw him in the Olympics. He will be on this undercard, and I think that's about it for like the outstanding fighters on this card. It's a solid fight card, but it's not one that you're going to be rubbing your palms together and going, I can't wait to, this is a good quality Saturday night. If you're single, this is probably what you're doing, unless you're going out that evening. But it definitely feels like a card the week before a mega pay-per-view is being offered.
I think that's a good way of putting it.
Okay, so then let me go through and do the marathon of everything else we have this week. We have on Thursday, which is tomorrow, we're recording a little later this week, Felix Perella is returning on a Salida Promotions card in Puerto Rico on DAZN. There are a few more fights on that undercard, but what I'd recommend people check out is Kira Tapia. She's someone that I've been watching. Kira Tapia is trained by Ivan Calderon. She is someone that I think is a dark horse in women's boxing at 130 pounds. I think she's extremely talented and just has kind of gone under the radar. On Friday, I believe, DAZN will feature Michael Conlon facing unbeaten guy from your region of the Northeast, Kevin Walsh. So that's a battle, and I think that's a compelling matchup in the sense of, what does Michael Conlon have left? He's an absolute outstanding boxer. He's great at that amateur boxing style, but there are major questions around his durability. He's been hit, he's been hurt, and it's quite clear that there's a certain level that he is struggling to get past, and the question is, can he get back to a world title fight? Let alone, can he win a world title? I think the question now is, can he even get into a world title fight? Whereas Kevin Walsh, I think, is playing with house money. He's a regional fighter who has built a solid fan base. His best attribute is he's willing to punch with people. He hits hard and he'll exchange with you. So this feels like an interesting matchup to see if Michael Conlon still has some of those elite attributes, as in my opinion, the best version of Conlon probably beats Kevin Walsh, but Kevin Walsh is also a puncher, and if Conlon is diminished, he may run the risk of being knocked out in this fight. ProBox TV will be offering the return of Lester Martinez, taking on Emmanuel Aleem for the vacant WBC interim super middleweight title. If you remember, one of the best fights, in my opinion, the best fight of last year was Christian Mbili versus Lester Martinez. And Billy was promoted to the WBC super middleweight champion. And now Lester Martinez will be fighting for the interim. Emmanuel Aleem is a tricky guy. He'll look to set you up and throw big power. He's a veteran. He's had some big wins. He might be a little past his prime, but he is a tricky guy. This is, to me, the type of fight where we see the professionalism of Lester Martinez, because you can actually see sometimes guys come out of a fight of the year, feel as though they've become a superstar, and take damage they're not sure they took, and then have an off performance in their subsequent fight. So for me, this is a true test of the professionalism of Martinez, who I think has the potential of being a star in the boxing world, to come back after an exciting fight and show fight fans that he's capable of having an encore, of having another great performance. On this undercard, we also have Kevin Anton, one of our favorites, taking on Kudretilo Abdukriov.
Abduklarov. Yeah.
Abduklarov. That's a good fight in the sense that Anton is showing elements of the Sebastian Fundora, tall guy who puts a lot of pressure on, but now he's facing a boxer who's going to, box. He's not going to just sit there and be compliant with.
He's a little diminished, though.
He's a little diminished, but this should answer a levels thing to a certain extent. And I swear I'm going to let you talk. I'm just setting the stage for all these fights. Then we have your guy, Anthony Cuba, taking on Yair Valtierra. Really good mid-level, kind of regional level fight. I absolutely love that fight. I think there's something there with Cuba as well. And then on Saturday, I love these British cards. George Ledard facing Tyler Denny. Ledard might be something. I think Ledard's trending in the right way. And then our guy, middleweight Jimmy Sands, who really reminds me of John Ryder. I believe he's trained by John Ryder, is taking on Derek Azaz in the co-feature. If you have time and you don't have a life and you're not watching March Madness, might as well throw that one on too, because that's going to be a whole lot of fun. Dakota, what says you? What stands out?
I love me some Anthony Cuba, man. I don't know anything about the opponent, but I think that he's got that Venado thing where he's a fighter that, because he's had a loss here and there, or the record's not perfect, that he's going to be brought in as like an opponent, but I don't think it's long before he's the prospect.
Well, just to give you an update, this is the guy that beat Jonathan Navarro, and he also has fought on some top-rank undercards and lost to some prospects. Gotcha. In the chat, Mankey Crazy is saying Conlon, Targu, and Shushu in New York. Bruce Carrington, I don't love that fight. That's not a great
I don't like
fight.
that at all.
I don't like that fight. I think that's two different guys on two different journeys at this point. But that's it. We did a marathon show. Thank you to Larry Goldberg. Thank you, Dakota, for being on the show. Dakota, any final words for this marathon of a show?
Listen, bro, I think if you're a New York guy, I think going and supporting some of what Boxing Insider is doing with the Sony Hall club shows. If you grew up going to club shows like I did, both amateur and professional, it's just like a cool thing to support. And if you want that to kind of continue on in New York City, we have to show up for it, and obviously it's getting harder and harder to do what Larry does. And I think the fans, can play a piece in helping to facilitate that continuing.
Perfect. Well, that's the show.